Hello and welcome to the first podcast of a series of podcasts organized by the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy with the support of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation on public opinion perceptions in Greece and Turkey. My name is Ioannis Grigoriadis. I'm an associate professor at Bilkent University in Ankara and the head of the Turkey program at ELIAMEP, the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy. I'm honored to be joined today by two distinguished journalists from Greece and Turkey, and our topic will be the effect of the war in Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, on the public opinion in Greece and Turkey. With me, we have Ms. Sezin Öney, who's a journalist and a columnist at Politikyol, electronic newspaper, and Ms. Alexandra Voudouri, who is a diplomatic affairs editor at Athens Municipal Radio and Macropolis GR, and she's also affiliated with ELIAMEP. I will start with Ms. Öney and ask the first question. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has shocked the international public community and shaken the international order. How this seminal event be received by the Turkish public opinion?
Well, the Turkish public opinion was actually getting quite favorable to Russia. That has ceased. That's come to a halt. But it's not that Russia is seen in a very negative light as in the rest of Europe. But in general, there was the perception that Turkey should be remaining neutral in this conflict. As soon as the conflict has started, the opinion polls showed that around almost 75% of the public favored neutrality. And this continues on, actually. So in that sense, there wasn't the shock that Europe experienced, and there wasn't the feeling that Turkey should be clearly on the side of Ukraine or should be going against Russia. But rather, Turkey should be not caught between a rock and a hard place and stayed out of this conflict. This was the general perception, and this is still continuing. But aside from that, as I mentioned, especially in the first days of the conflict, first weeks of the conflict, this is just a casual observation. You could hear the public speaking about this on the street in general. And it's rare that a foreign affairs issue becomes a matter of debate in Turkey, but there was a shock. But as I said, it didn't produce some kind of hostility, specific hostility towards Russia or a specific friendship towards Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Ms. Voudouri, how do you evaluate the position of the Greek public opinion?
Well, first of all, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has been and still is of a great interest to the Greek public opinion because, first and foremost, there are strong ties with both Russia and Ukraine. There is a keen interest to the Greek public opinion at large due to the fact that all three countries share the same Orthodox religion, even though, as we know, these three churches do not in reality harmoniously coexist, especially due to the fact that the Ecumenical Patriarchate and the Greek Orthodox Church have recognized back in 2019 the autocephalus of the Ukraine's war. Secondly, a large Greek community lives in both countries, and especially in Ukraine. And in fact, in the first days of the invasion, if you remember, at least 10 Greeks were killed by Russian bombings. And especially after the complete destruction of Mariupol, there has been a great interest, and we have seen, for instance, the foreign minister, Mr. Dendias, even taking the issue to The Hague to research possible war crimes. So Additionally, we should not also neglect that there are strong historic ties with both countries related to Greece's War of Independence in the 1820s. And for all these reasons, briefly explain the interest of the Greek public and therefore of the Greek media, which still have a very strong interest in the dreadful events surrounding the war in Ukraine. However, Mr. Grigoriadis, Professor Grigoriadis, the Greek public opinion, as you probably know, is highly divided on any issue, let alone on this one that involves a war between two countries of a special importance and significance for Greece. And for all these reasons, again, it has not been a surprise, at least to me, that in most public opinions, a high percentage of Greeks has not condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine. For instance, I'm referring to a public opinion published in Politikyol, where 40% of Greek people did not condemn Putin's decision to invade Ukraine. And from all 6 European countries, this has been by far the highest percentage. And another opinion poll back in early March, 75% condemned Putin's stance, but at the same time, 60% were also condemning Volodymyr Zelensky, that is the Ukraine's president. So we've seen this division within the Greek public opinion. There is also a difference of the coverage between among the Greek media, meaning that the Greek dailies are giving much more in-depth analysis on what is going on, and they're giving a more balanced, let's say, aspect of stories related to the war in Ukraine. They don't only have Greek experts and analysts speaking about the war, but also foreign analysis, whereas TV programs usually just use the virtual perception and images of the war. They're trying to increase the sentiment. However, that has not been successful. Plus, 2 TV stations in Greece also have correspondents in Moscow, which is not comparing to other European networks. I think Greece still has correspondents in Moscow who, I'm afraid, are just reproducing Russia's narratives regarding the war. These correspondents, of course, were there before the war and are not even using the word war. That's why I said that they're using Russia's narratives regarding the war. And I could say, reproducing Russia's propaganda. So there you have the media approach, and that might explain why the public opinion is still divided regarding Russia's invasion in Ukraine.
If there was a change in Turkish public psyche, it became even more pro-Bayraktar and pro-arms industry, because the Bayraktar, the unmanned drones, these weapons have become even more popular in Turkey among the public as a really big success of the Turkish industry and Turkish foreign policy. So in that sense, there is great pride among all factions, although, of course, Bayraktar is, of course, that the family is affiliated with President Erdogan as being relatives. But at the same time, across the general public, in all the parts of the Turkish society, there's a sense of pride with the growing success of the Turkish arms production. This homemade weapons, all this weapon industry is a source of pride for the Turkish public in general.
So, both of you mentioned responsibility as one of the parameters of the approach of the Greek and Turkish public opinion. And my question refers to the position of NATO in that discussion. Is NATO considered in Greece and Turkey as part of the problem in Ukraine or as a part of the solution in Ukraine? So, Alexandra?
I could say neither. I mean, I don't think, first and foremost, that the majority of the Greek public opinion feels secure within NATO. There is a huge disappointment for some NATO member states' behavior vis-à-vis our relation and their relations with Turkey, respectively, especially during the high-tension year of 2020. I think one of, also additionally, I would have to mention here that the vast majority, 1 out of the 2 Greeks, do not support government policies regarding, for instance, the decision of Prime Minister to supply weapons to Ukraine. So we have this kind of peculiar stance towards NATO. So we don't really think, I mean, the Greeks do not really think that NATO could be either the solution or a problem to this conflict. Plus, as we all know, our foreign policy and the public opinion is very much Turkey-oriented, and we actually monitor how Turkey, as a NATO member, behaves towards this war. And the public opinion is questioning whether a NATO member can be neutral as Turkey is, and why is not taking part or is not aligned with decisions of NATO and EU as well regarding sanctions against Russia. So I think in general, and in contrast with other NATO member states like the Baltic countries and others that they're wishing to enter the North Atlantic Alliance, this is the sentiment within the Greek public opinion.
Thank you very much. Sezin, how's the view in Turkey?
Actually, the public perception towards NATO in Turkey remained quite constant over the years, and it's quite instrumentalizing. Around 70% of the public across all party affiliations and ideologies support NATO membership of Turkey and thinks that Turkey should remain a member of NATO. In contrast, for example, the EU membership support was fluctuating over the years, but yeah, it's around 60% as well now. So in that sense, NATO is seen as an instrument that Turkey can utilize at times when needed. And it contributes to the security of Turkey in that sense as an instrument. There's certainly confidence that Turkey actually has a great military force and it can defend itself, but NATO alliance enhances that already existing strong muscle in the Turkish public opinion, and it's quite similar to the actual approach of the governments over the years. So in that sense, Turkish public opinion and Turkish government opinion before AK Party and now currently with AK Party coincides. So the anti-NATO sentiment is only among the leftist, staunchly leftist circles. and it's in that sense quite fringe. And now NATO membership in general and how Turkey utilizes it, both in Greek-Turkish relations previously and also now related to the Ukraine wars, offshore issues like Sweden and Finland's membership are all regarded as transactional. Turkey can use it as a bargaining chip, and it's seen something positive by the public opinion as well.
The question of NATO's enlargement would be my next one, in fact. So Sezin made a brief mention of the issue because it's been an issue heavily featuring in international media over the last couple of days. So my question would be, is this enlargement considered positively, neutrally, or just as an instrument to promote national interests? So, Sezin?
Well, actually, that depends on the public psyche of how Turkey will be affected by the enlargement. There's not a really sophisticated debate in Turkey related to the foreign affairs issues. Unfortunately, the appeasement of the media and the pressures that the media has been facing has degraded much of the reporting quality of any analysis in general. And although reporters, quite a number of reporters across the Turkish media's different spectrum, diverse spectrum, has traveled to Ukraine and reported from there, there wasn't really a genuine follow-up in the public, so it wasn't. It ceased to be an issue in public debate very quickly. So internal domestic issues related to the political alliances or any mundane political debate within Turkey took the precedent to hit the agenda much more in a much more bigger way than Ukraine did after the initial shock. So you don't have this nuanced political analysis that's infiltrating to that is disseminated among the public, really. So it's a very elite discussion regarding Finland and Sweden's membership to NATO. And in general, the Turkish public remains, and also not just the Turkish public, but much of the Turkish political elite as well, it remains very much removed from how Europe is actually affected by the war in Ukraine. Be it the energy issues, be it in general the foreign policy perception changes, or also, for example, all this Ukrainian refugee issue, how it's having an impact on the European countries in general, sociologically and psychologically. It doesn't have a resonance in Turkey, really. So Turkey is in that sense very much removed from the European debate, as if it's totally not a part of Europe. Once again, it was a demonstration of that, in my opinion, according to my observations. It was just a foreign, far-away debate. And as I mentioned again and again, it's just about the transactional side, how Turkey might benefit from this conflict.
Alexandra, how different is the situation in Greece?
Even though the historic decision of both Scandinavian countries to apply for NATO membership is all over the news, as you've mentioned very correctly. I think, again, this is a discussion, as Sezin said, about Turkish society, a very elite discussion. Even the Finnish Prime Minister, while visiting Athens, gave interviews to Greek media and explained the positions of her country. There is no much analysis of how the Greeks might see NATO's enlargement. Even though there is a warm and undoubted and with no asterisk support of the Greek government towards the application of both Scandinavian countries. I think there is no much interest within the Greek public. However, I think that since there are fears for the extension of the war and the consequences of the war, they might feel, the Greeks might feel fear of what could that mean for the development of the war, or whether Putin might hit other countries, NATO countries as well. And in fact, within the public debate, again, we are talking about Turkey's position vis-a-vis the two applications, and why a NATO member like Turkey is again using the case of both Scandinavian countries as a bargaining chip. Again, this is a discussion within the Greek media. I could add here, because I use the word fear, and that might explain again how Greeks feel now. At the beginning there was shock as everywhere else, but now their fears are mostly related to the economical consequences, to the consequences of their own, economic situation, since as everywhere, but Greece has been hit from the financial crisis and after the pandemic. So there is a growing fear of where this war is going to lead. And I would say that the major sentiment now within the Greek public opinion is fear about the future, and especially about the financial situation, both of the country and of their personal income, I could say.
Following up to this point, Alexandra, I think we also need to discuss whether after this invasion, Russia is perceived as a security threat in Greece and Turkey, of course. But can you tell us whether Greeks consider Russia as a threat after all this? Do they think that violating international law in the way that Russia did in Ukraine may have ramifications for themselves?
Well, that is very interesting and contradicting, because, as I've mentioned, the Greek, a large majority has not condemned Russia's decision to invade a sovereign country and to, as you very correctly said, violated international law. And since there is this focus on Turkey, this could have been and is being used by the government as an argument why we should not be neutral in this war, since we have a troubling making neighbor, or a country that violates the international law, etc., etc. There is fear regarding security, and not only security in general, but also on security and energy security. But of course, following the threats of Vladimir Putin and his foreign minister Sergei Lavrov of a nuclear war, definitely that has influenced the Greek public opinion, and there also fear of possible events. At the beginning, just after these threats by Vladimir Putin as well as by Sergei Lavrov, there is a huge consumption of. The public, the Greeks were going to the drugstores, trying to find even medicines that could help them survive a possible nuclear incident. So yes, there are fears, and that is why I said that the major feeling and sentiment regarding the war for the majority of the Greeks right now is fear fear for everything, and including threats, not only on security in general, but also on energy security. They do not know how this will continue and affect their lives, especially in autumn, and whether the EU would be already prepared to secure energy supplies for next winter.
Sezin, Russia's relationship with Turkey has been very complicated over the last few years. So how more complicated does this war make it?
Well, actually, Turkey, in a way, managed to steer away, garnering attracting the anger of Russia, and also not getting hostile, both publicly and in foreign policy with Russia. So managing both sides, having in that sense a balanced, in quotation marks, of course, this balanced approach between these warring sides, between Ukraine and Russia. Certainly, as I mentioned, the general friendship, if there was at all such a friendship with Russia, is tarnished, of course. So there is a break there, of course, but there's also not a hostility developing. There's also not a general negativity, both towards the Russian public or Russian foreign policy or Russia in general. Also, Putin, in a way, had a soft power image. Of course, not. It's ironic. Of course, it's not soft power, but his image as a strong leader was popular in Turkey, and this also faced a downfall to an extent. But at the same time, Turkish public, and you have also written brilliantly about this, Professor Grigoriadis, this Eurasianist approach to foreign policy is continuing in a way. In the sense that there isn't a more, for example, Western approach now that Turkey has sided to an extent with the West, allied with the West in this conflict, or there isn't a very anti-Eurasianist sentiment developing. But on the contrary, Turkey should not put all the eggs in one basket and should be friendly with whomever is necessary, whomever the interests lie. Maybe the only caveat in this multifaceted foreign policy perception of the public is towards the Middle East. If there is a party that's ascending in Turkey's descending in Turkish popular opinion, is the Middle East relations, and these are, for example, always regarded, for example, Turkey's rapprochement with United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. These are more mocked about, or these are not really fancied by the Turkish public in general. So the Middle East affiliation is clearly lost, and Turkey does not want to be placed among the Middle Eastern part of the world, but tilting towards Europe and Asia seems fine, both in the Turkish public opinion and, of course, in the Turkish foreign policy approach as well.
So my last question will refer to the network that Russia developed in Greece and Turkey and other European countries that had contributed to the rise of Russian soft power in our continent. And I refer to media outlets, political party support, and presence in the public sphere in various ways. So how do these structures fare in Greece and Turkey under the current circumstances? And how influential they remain in defining the public discourse on the war in Ukraine? Alexandra?
That's an excellent question. I think Russia has been trying to gain influence through Orthodox faith, first and foremost, in other Balkan countries as well, like North Macedonia, Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece. It was using this old strategy of the Orthodox, let's say, Commonwealth, which has found fertile ground, as well as Vladimir Putin's revisionism, among willing supporters, I could say, here in Greece, based on anti-systemic, anti-Western, anti-European, and rational concepts of conspiracy, let's say, and outlooks that have been demonstrated as a result of various impetuses. If we remember, throughout the financial crisis, after the PRESPA, the signing of the PRESPA agreement, during the pandemic, with this anti-vax movement, and now with Russia's invasion in Ukraine, all these groups have been always coordinating themselves with this anti-systemic agenda. And they have brought together extreme forces from the political spectrum, meaning that they have been trying to coordinate extreme far-right parties like Golden Dawn, the publicly admitted pro-Russian party Elliniki Lisi, Greek Solution, which is also now at the Greek parliament, and extreme left fractions in the left political spectrum in Greece and within Syriza party as well. So this broad group of these religious zealots and conspiracy theorists and others have been trying to coordinate themselves, and they were acting in many and various ways, including in the media, because we had also some owners of media directly linked to Vladimir Putin. And in fact, the Greek government's recent expulsion of Russian diplomats, who were not exactly diplomats, there were people working with this network of people, and all the decision of the Greek government is directly linked, I could say, to the creation of this network. Now, this network is not that visible anymore, perhaps because they do know that they're being monitored more closely, not only from the Greek intelligence services, but also from the EU and the United States. All do know who these people are and how they have coordinated and they have tried to influence, and they actually succeeded in influencing the Greek public opinion. And it is not for a coincidence that Russia embassy's reaction towards some of the decision of the Greek government has been so fiercely and so strong, at least at the beginning of the war, and the announcements were undiplomatic in an unprecedented way. I do not think that they're not visible anymore. However, I'm not sure whether these have been completely distracted. I mean, they are there, but they're not visible anymore, because they do know now, especially after the sanction of these diplomats and advisors and whoever else were expelled from the Greek government, might not feel very welcome anymore. And that is why they are still here, but they're not that visible anymore, I think.
Thank you very much, Sezin, what's the situation in Turkey?
In fact, Russia's soft power in Turkey was quite different from the soft power, if at all, it had across Europe or in general in other parts of the world, in the sense that it was quite effortless. The fact that Russia was a non-Western power or even an anti-Western power that seemed to be so strong, especially with this cultic leader, this charismatic, again in quotation marks, leader, Putin. So there was an image of Russia as an out of Europe success story in a way. That's gone now, of course. That's tarnished. People are seeing that the Russian army is not doing as fine or as good as it should have, probably, as the image suggested. And also, Putin is more, in a way, a lunatic leader, more so than a strong and charismatic one. There are these perceptions, but at the same time, as I mentioned before, again and again, still this anti-Western side of Russia, it garners some sort of respect or support. That shows how much the Turkish public psyche and also the foreign policy approach has become non-Western, actually, more Eurasianist or more, let's say, diversified, because it was really a Western ally before, when I was growing up, and afterwards in my earlier years, I even witnessed that. But it has changed. The tendencies and the attitudes have really changed. But aside from that, that effortless soft image is damaged. But there is no, for example, boycott against Sputnik or in general, Russian media sources or Russian things in general. Alternatively, Russian people coming to Turkey, if they are at all, buying, for example, places or seeking refuge in Turkey, is seen as something possible and positive, even, or Ukrainians. And there are even the popular there's even the popular rhetoric that Russians and Ukrainians are more preferable as compared to new residents of Turkey coming as refugees or as new official residents from the Middle East. There's so still that understanding that Ukraine or Russia is more Western. At the same time, it's ironic, but there's also that side of the public sentiment, and they would be more readily accepted as newcomers to Turkey than, for example, let's say, newcomers from Syria, Iraq, or other places or Middle Eastern countries in general. And also, it's interesting that the Turkish nationalist sentiment in general didn't vilify Russia as much as it would. Of course, there were general criticisms, and there were general security questions directed towards Russia, more so than before. But still, you don't see Russia as an enemy image. So still, you don't maybe Russia has, in that sense, has lost this effortless soft power in Turkey, but at the same time didn't make an enemy out of itself as well.
Thank you very much. This answer brings us to the end of our podcast. Thank you very much for your participation. I would like to Thank you for being with us today, Ms. Alexandra Voudouri and Ms. Sezin Öney.
Thank you.
And it's my great pleasure to host this discussion with you on a very important topic. Please stay tuned and follow the upcoming podcasts of the ELIAMEP podcast series on perceptions in Greece and Turkey on topics of mutual interest. Thank you very much.